Between 1933 and 1945, the organization of the Luftwaffe underwent several changes. Originally, the German Military High Command, for their air warfare forces, decided to use an organizational structure similar to the Army and Navy, treating the aviation branch as a strategic weapon of war. Later on, during the period of rapid rearmament, the Luftwaffe was organized more in a geographical fashion. Under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was prohibited from having an air force, with the former German Empire's Luftstreitkräfte disbandment in 1920. German pilots were secretly trained for military aviation, first in the Soviet Union during the late 1920s, and then in Germany in the early 1930s. In Germany, the training was done under the guise of the German Air Sports Association at the Central Commercial Pilots School. The formation of the German Air Arm was openly announced in February 1935, with Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring as its commander-in-chief, in blatant defiance of the Versailles Treaty. Initial plans were for long-term growth of the Luftwaffe over a period of 5 years, with the intention of using the Luftwaffe as a strategic force. These plans were changed several times, especially after the June 1936 death of Walter Weaver and the succession of Ernst Udet. The focus and role of the Luftwaffe became one of ground support for the German army during its lightning war campaigns. Göring, using his political capital, was able to get significant resources allocated to the Luftwaffe, more so than the Army of the Navy. This made the Luftwaffe one of the most powerful forces in Europe during its initial years. Partly due to its ground support role, the Luftwaffe was reorganized in a fashion similar to the Army units, with one unit controlling a specific area. Each Luftwaffe unit was self-contained and had complete control over all aspects of Luftwaffe forces in that area. Before becoming head of the Luftwaffe, Göring was Interior Minister of Prussia. In this position he had formed his own army, starting from a 400-men police department to regiment size. When Göring took over the Luftwaffe, he brought the regiment along with him to the Luftwaffe and created his own ground forces in the form of Luftwaffe field divisions and paratrooper regiments under the Luftwaffe. He eventually included a tank regiment, flak units and a signals regiment under the Luftwaffe umbrella. Formation and expansion. During the 1930s and 1940s, air power had not matured enough to be considered a dominant weapon of war. Unlike the other two forces, air power did not have past experience to draw upon. This resulted in the Air Force having to learn from experience rather than the classroom. There were no cohesive ideas for the organization of a structured modern Air Force. One train of thought subordinated the Air Force to the Army in support of land operations and to the Navy for maritime tasks. It would be staffed by soldiers or sailors trained to fly. The second theory envisioned a centralized, well-organized Air Force to be used as a weapon of war, like the Army and Navy. German aviators from World War I followed this thought process. Since they had the backing of the German political leadership, this is how the Luftwaffe was originally conceived and formed. Following the tradition of putting a soldier in charge of the army and a sailor in charge of the navy, an aviator was designated to lead the Luftwaffe. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, also the cabinet minister for aviation. Göring formed a Luftwaffe High Command for operational management. Within the German Air Force leadership, the general opinion was that the Luftwaffe was a tactical rather than a strategic air force. Hence, in order to support the various army groups, the Luftwaffe was organized in similar fashion to the army. Its units had a flexible composition, with subunits being added or removed when necessary. These subunits tended to be semi-autonomous and highly mobile. This offered the flexibility required to support the ground units. From the start of the Spanish Civil War, the Luftwaffe was in action continuously without the time for rest or training. Multiple political acts and the consequent need for a show of strength forced the Luftwaffe to be in a perpetual state of readiness. This did not allow time for organizational strategy. Göring complicated the hierarchy by bringing the paratrooper and flak corps under his command. Due to his political differences with the army leadership, he raised his own police force as Prussian Minister of the Interior. This later became the paratroop tank corps. By September 1939, the Luftwaffe had a total of 4,000 aircraft and 400,000 personnel. This strength had grown to 1,700,000 by 1941. In total, 571,000 of these were in anti-aircraft units and another 18% were in the signals branch. Only 36% of 588,000 comprised aircrew, but this also included the aircraft maintenance personnel. At the end of the war on 8 May 1945, more than 97,000 aircrew would be reported dead, wounded or missing. Organizational levels. All aspects of aviation including the Luftwaffe came under the control of the Reichsluftfahrtministerium, the Reich Air Ministry. Since the Luftwaffe was one of the three armed forces, it came under the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces from a military command point of view. Göring was the cabinet minister of aviation during most of this period. He also served as the Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe. As a cabinet minister, he was responsible for civil aviation and all aspects of aircraft manufacturing and supply. Operationally, the Luftwaffe command was shared by the Inspector of Combat Flight and the Inspector of Fighters along with the Secretary of State for Aviation. The German Air Force was divided into three operational branches: flying troops, anti-aircraft artillery, air signal troops. These three branches were further divided into sub-branches such as paratroops, air engineering, air medical corps and aircrew. Since the Luftwaffe was organized in a geographical fashion rather than on a strategic functional basis, it had an independent administrative as well as an operational command structures. Each geographical area had its own supply and maintenance corps. For this reason, any aviation units moving within the geographical area did not need to carry its own maintenance staff. This allowed for a great deal of mobility within the Luftwaffe. Strategically, all three German military forces were part of a single service called the defensive power, to defend, and German Die Macht, the power might, controlled by the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht. The head of the OKW was part of the cabinet. Within the OKW, each service was headed by its own operational command: Commander-in-Chief of the Army, Commander-in-Chief of the Air Force, Commander-in-Chief of the Navy. The top levels of control of the Luftwaffe resided with the RLM, the German Air Ministry, and its operational branch, the Oberkommando der Luftwaffe, or Air Force High Command. These institutions together were responsible for the direction of research, production and overall maintenance of aircraft. As head of the Luftwaffe, Göring was responsible for the overall war effort and for the resources sent to a particular region. As a cabinet minister, he was able to get significant resources and personnel allocated to the Luftwaffe compared to other branches of the armed forces. In 1945, close to the end of the war, Robert Ritter von Greim replaced Göring as Commander-in-Chief. Operational, the OKL, as the operational branch of the RLM, had complete control over unit movements, formation and personnel transfers. It had a strength of 25,000 personnel in 1939. On an operational level, the Luftwaffe was divided into air fleets, not entirely unlike the nearly contemporary United States Army Air Corps and USAAF numbered air forces. Each air fleet was responsible for a particular geographic region. They were self-contained units equipped with all types of aircraft and their own supply elements, maintenance staff, administration and legal departments. At the start of the war, the Luftwaffe had 4 Luftflotten, each responsible for roughly a quarter of Germany. As the war progressed, 3 more were created as the areas under German rule expanded. Luftflotte 5 was created in 1940 to direct operations in Norway and Denmark. The commander of each Luftflotte was responsible for all fighter as well as support operations within the region. A fighter leader was responsible for fighter operations within the region and reported to the commander. Each Luftflotte in turn was divided into many air districts and air corps. The purpose of a Luftgau was to provide administrative and logistical support to each airfield, whereas the Fliegerkorps controlled all operational matters. The Luftgau headquarters command consisted of 1 general major and a staff of 50 to 100 officers. Each Fliegerkorps would have a number of units under its command. These were usually several wings, but sometimes also specialized squadrons and battle groups. Tactical. Each Geschwader within the Fliegerkorps was roughly the size of an RAF wing, with about 90 to 120 aircraft under its command. These numbers varied as subunits were added or removed. Each wing had a particular task and were mostly equipped with aircraft appropriate to the task. Other types of aircraft were also sometimes attached. A Geschwader was commanded by a Geschwader Commodore, with the rank of either a major, lieutenant colonel or colonel. The unit also had other staff officers with administrative duties such as the German adjutant, technical and operations officers. These were usually experienced aircrew still flying on operations. Other specialist staff were navigation, signals and intelligence personnel. A headquarters fighter was attached to each Geschwader. Strategic level, Oberkommando der Luftwaffe. The OKW was the highest in the military command structure. It was responsible for the coordinated effort of the 3 military arms. It was headed by Wilhelm Keitel after he took over from War Minister Werner von Blomberg in 1938. Since the head of the Luftwaffe, Göring, was also a cabinet minister, any Luftwaffe operational orders would come from Hitler to him, who would pass them on to Luftwaffe leaders, bypassing the OKW. On 5 February 1944, through the efforts of Günther Kortin and Karl Koller, the Luftwaffe High Command was formed. Colonel General Hans Jeschonek was appointed Chief of Staff of the OKL. This created a military command out of the all-encompassing Reich Air Ministry, controlling all aspects of aviation. The OKL covered general as well as operational staff of the Luftwaffe. The following parts of the Luftwaffe were under its command: the General Staff, Operational Staff, Weapons Inspectorates, Inspector of Fighters, Supply and Equipment, a Signals Division. The other components, such as armament and aircraft manufacturing, remained under the control of the RLM. The OKL was led by the Chief of the General Staff. It was strategically divided into 8 directorates numbered consecutively. The directorates were Operations Directorate, Organization Directorate, Training Directorate, Troop Movement Directorate, Intelligence Directorate, Equipment and Supply Directorate, Historical Archives Directorate, Personnel Management Directorate. There were also 17 inspectorates: Luftwaffe Inspection 1 Reconnaissance, Luftwaffe Inspection 2 Bombers and Dive Bombers, Luftwaffe Inspection 3 Fighter, Destroyer, Ground Support and Weaponry, Luftwaffe Inspection 5 Air Safety and Equipment, Luftwaffe Inspection 6 Motor Vehicles, Luftwaffe Inspection 7 Signal Communications. Luftwaffe Inspection 8 Naval Aircraft. Luftwaffe Inspection 9 Pilot Training Schools. Luftwaffe Inspection 10 Troop Service and Training. Luftwaffe Inspection 11 Parachute and Air Landing Forces. Luftwaffe Inspection 12 Navigation. Luftwaffe Inspection 13 Air Defense. Luftwaffe Inspection 14 Medical. Luftwaffe Inspection 15 Air Defense Zones. Luftwaffe Inspection 16 Air Sea Rescue Services under the umbrella of Sea Rescue Service German, Seenotdienst. Luftwaffe Inspection 17 Construction Troops and Prisoners of War. Luftwaffe Inspection 18 Luftwaffe Field Units. Operational level Luftflotten and Fliegerdivisionen. 6 Luftkreise were established on 1 April 1934. These were each the size of an air corps and were basic territorial units of the Luftwaffe. Following its geographical organization, the headquarters were as given in the table. In addition, Luftkreis 7 was established on 12 October 1937 with its headquarters at Braunschweig, and is shown incorporated into the above-mentioned table. Each Luftkreis was led by a Heerflieger commander in charge of all aviation units within its area. These included 2 or 3 Luftgau commandos of Signals Command, a medical battalion and a procurement and supply group. Their area of operations also included civilian airfields and civil air defense. The following year, all the replacement battalions in that area also came under the control. In 1936, these were extended to regiment-size Flegeersatzregimente. From 1935-36, flak units in the area also came under the command. Hermann Göring and Erhard Milch appointed retired Army Lieutenant Generals to lead each Luftkreis. These were Hans Harp, Edmund Warkenfeld and Leonhard Kaupisch. They were promoted to General der Flieger. A retired Navy officer, Konrad Zander, was similarly promoted and put in charge of Luftkreis V, supporting the naval units. 2 Luftwaffe officers, Colonel Hugo Sperrel and Major General Karl Schweikhardt, were put in charge of the remaining 2 Luftkreise without being promoted. Operationally, the Luftwaffe organization underwent changes in July 1938. Luftkreise were consolidated into 3 Luftwaffengruppen commandos. As a result, on 1 August 1938, Luftwaffenkommando Ostpreußen replaced Luftkreis 1. This change also rendered the 3-digit Geschwader identifiers meaningless. For 1 November 1938, Geschwader identifiers were changed universally. The 3rd digit of the unit identifier was replaced with the same digit as its parent Luftwaffengruppen-Kommando. For example, all units under Luftwaffengruppen-Kommando 1 had the 3rd digit of their identifiers replaced with A1. For units under Luftwaffengruppen-Kommando Ostpreußen, the 3rd digit was replaced with A0. By the end of April 1939, another Luftwaffengruppen-Kommando was added. All 4 Luftwaffengruppen-Kommando were renamed Luftflotte. Geschwaders under each Luftflotte were renumbered sequentially. Each Luftflotte received a batch of 25. For example, Luftflotte 1 Geschwaders were numbered 0 to 25, Luftflotte 2 Geschwaders became 26 to 50, and so on. Luftgau within the Air Ministry. For administration purposes, the Luftwaffe was organized into Luftgau based on the Army's Wehrkreis. A Luftgau was responsible for all administrative activities, such as training, administration, maintenance, air defense, signals, recruitment and reserve personnel. The general major leading the Luftgau commando of each Luftgau reported to the Air Ministry. Those Luftgau re-established within Germany were numbered non-consecutively with Roman numerals. Luftgau were also established as required in occupied Europe and were named after the location, e.g. Luftgau Belgian Nord-Frankreich was headquartered in Brussels and responsible for Belgium and northern France. Each Luftgau had its own section for the following matters: operations, adjutant, legal, administration, signals, supply, restricted flying areas. These sections were numbered in Arabic numerals followed by a Luftgau designator. For example, Section 3 of Luftgau Vi would be designated 3 Vi. Flying units used the services of a Luftgau through Flughafenbereich Kommandanturen. Each Luftgau usually had 5 such commands. Each regional command was divided into 5 or more Einsatzwaffen-Kommandanturen. The operational commands were located at the airfields where it serviced the flying units. Luftflotte operationally under the OKL, all Luftwaffe units were organized into Luftflotte, which were equivalent to an army group. Its size and number of subordinated units was flexible and changed depending on need. The Luftflotte were created according to the geographical area. As new territories came under occupation, new Luftflotten were created. Each Luftflotte had an adjutant, a staff officer assisting the commanding officer. Although a Luftflotte could be moved from one area to another by the RLM, the Luftflotte had absolute control over all aspects of aviation in that area, including ground operations. This also included legal, administration, signals and supply work. They were essentially divided into operational or administrative commands. The signal services consisted of 3 Luftnachrichten Regimenter in a Luftflotte. There was also a Fliegerabwehrkanone unit, Fliegerkorps and Fliegerdivision. A Luftflotte was operationally divided into 1 or more Fliegerkorps of varying size, depending on its area of operations. They were responsible for all operational matters such as deployment, air traffic, ordnance and maintenance. A Fliegerkorps could potentially be loaned out to another Luftflotte depending on the nature of the operation. There were a total of 13 Fliegerkorps. Similar to the Luftflotte, each Fliegerkorps had its own geographical area of operations. It consisted of several Geschwader along with reconnaissance Gruppen. The Geschwader could be either fighter or bomber units. Depending on the nature or purpose of the Fliegerkorps, it would have only bomber or fighter units. Similar to the Luftflotte, a Fliegerkorps also had an adjutant as well as other departments. However, it did depend on the parent Luftflotte for administrative and supply purposes. The Fliegerkorps were numbered consecutively in Roman numerals. During the initial organization of the Luftwaffe, it was divided into Fliegerdivisionen. However, during later reorganizations, most of these were replaced by the Fliegerkorps. Some remained in operation on the Eastern Front. A Jagdkorps was a more specialized version of a Fliegerkorps with limited responsibility to fight command only. A JAGD division was subordinated to a Jagdkorps but specialized in fighter operations. JAGD division were active at one point or other during this period. Together the fighter force of Luftwaffe was also called Jagdwaffe. The Luftwaffe also had specialist divisions for testing new aircraft as well as captured Allied machines. It was initially unnumbered and simply called the Lehr Division, but in later years several Airprobings Commando were created to test specific new aircraft. Along with the aircraft, it was also responsible for testing anti-aircraft defenses and air signals equipment. The staff of this division was required to have prior combat experience. The layer units in this division were usually made part of operational units, receiving help from them for testing under combat conditions. This division did not undertake the testing of experimental aircraft. As the war went on, some of the units under its command were used for operational purposes.